Dawn painted the sea in streaks of amber and pale rose, casting long shadows through the broken windows of the old lighthouse. Alarin sat with her back to the stone wall, Cale sleeping beside her in a fevered sprawl, his brow damp with sweat. She hadn't closed her eyes all night. Her mind replayed the fall, the betrayal, the flash of the sheriff's coat as he stepped forward and ordered her death, over and over. The memory was not fading. It was sharpening. She watched the coastline with haunted eyes. Somewhere beyond those crooked hills, the men who'd tried to kill her were carrying on as if nothing had happened. They would be back to their routines, tipping their hats to widows they'd sentenced to ruin, sipping coffee from polished cups in the sheriff's hall, joking about how the wind had claimed a girl too proud for her own good. Maybe the preacher would sermonize on divine justice. Maybe the mayor would shrug and move on. Dusthaven would forget her, but Alarin Calder wasn't dead. She would not forgive. And she would not forget. Cale stirred beside her. She turned immediately, laying a cool hand against his temple. He blinked blearily at her, eyes glazed with the remnants of fever. "Still here?" he murmured. "Yes," she said. "Still. You get any sleep?" She shook her head. He tried to sit up but winced and let himself fall back. His wound, though stitched, had begun to swell. The infection hadn't spread far, thanks to the salve, but it needed better tending. "We can't stay here," she said. Softly. "Too risky," he agreed. "They'll search this whole coastline eventually. Then we need a plan." Cale let out a long breath. "Got any friends in town? Anyone you can trust?" Alarin laughed a bitter, hollow sound. "Trust in Dusthaven? That's like pouring water into a cracked jar. No. They either stood by or held the rope. What about out of town? Nearby ranches? Farms?" She frowned, thinking. "There's one place." Cale waited. The Meekrise. They're 3 ridges east of Dusthaven. Run cattle and goats. Keep mostly to themselves. The widow Mira McCrae, she helped my mother once. After a storm took our roof off. She brought tarps, food. Didn't ask anything in return. Cale nodded slowly. Then she might help again. Maybe, but if the sheriff finds out. He locked eyes with her. We'll make sure he doesn't. They left the lighthouse before noon. Once Cale could walk without staggering. Alarin wrapped her long cloak tight and pulled the hood low. Cale wore a fisherman's coat they found in a rotted trunk, stained and thick enough to hide his wound. They moved inland, off the roads, cutting through gorges and brush, climbing ridge after ridge until the chimney smoke of the McCrae homestead came into view beneath a copper sky. Mira McCrae opened the door with a shotgun in hand and eyes sharp as broken glass. Her silver hair was braided tight against her head, and her dress bore patches on patches, but she stood straight as a pike and twice as unyielding. She saw Alarin and narrowed her eyes. Then she lowered the gun. "You're supposed to be dead," the old woman said flatly. "Not yet," Alarin replied. Mira studied her, then Cale. "You're bleeding." Cale offered a tight nod. "Been worse," Mira snorted. "You both look like hell." "Get inside." The McCrae house was small and tidy. A stone hearth dominated one wall, and rows of herbs hung from the beams. Alarin collapsed into a chair while Mira set a pot of water to boil. Cale, stubborn as a mule, tried to stand until Mira barked, "Sit or bleed on my floor." He sat. The old woman worked in silence, washing Cale's wound with a blend of alcohol and something pungent Alarin didn't recognize. Cale hissed but didn't flinch. "Want to tell me why the sheriff thinks you're in the sea right now?" Mira asked dryly. Alarin told her. Not all the details, but enough. The refusal, the cliff, the fall, the man who caught her. Cale's hand closed briefly over hers during the telling, grounding her. Mira listened without interruption. When Alarin finished, she stirred the fire and said, "They always thought they owned this town, Harrow and his ilk. I knew someday someone would push back. Didn't think it'd be a girl barely out of childhood." Alaren's voice was soft. I didn't think I'd live. Mira eyed her. You did, and you've got a choice now. Stay quiet, hide, or do something. Cale met Alaren's gaze. We need to bring them down, not just Harrow, all of them. The mayor, the preacher, the council, whatever they call themselves. Mira's brow arched. You're two people, one's wounded. The other's barely standing. What makes you think you can take on a town? Alaren's voice was steady. Because we know who they are. And they don't know who we're becoming. A slow smile crept across Mira's weathered face. Then you'll need allies. That night, by lamplight, Mira wrote a list of names. Some won't help, she warned. Too scared. Others might be willing. Not everyone in Dusthaven's lost their soul. Some just went quiet, waiting for someone else to speak first. She tapped the list. Start with Levi Bramble. Ex-sheriff before Harrow. He was pushed out, but he still got friends. Then there's Jonah Bell, runs the forge. Knows everyone's secrets, even if he won't say so. And Thea Vance, widow, lost her boy to a sheriff's bullet 2 years back. Where do we find them? Cale asked. Not in town, Mira said. Outskirts, farms, back roads, quiet spots. Don't approach all at once. Be careful. And if they say no? Alaren asked. Mira's smile turned grim. Then we remind them what it's like to be afraid of the wrong people. The next days passed in a haze of whispered meetings, secret handshakes, and shadowy paths. Cale and Alaren moved like ghosts, wearing borrowed clothes and using names that weren't theirs. They met Levi Bramble in an abandoned chapel, where he kept his rifle under a pew and a flask of whiskey under the altar. Didn't think anyone'd ever come knocking, he muttered. Been watching this town rot from the edge. Didn't have the stomach to fight alone. But maybe ... maybe it's time. Jonah Bell was harder to win over. He refused to look Cale in the eye. I've got a daughter, he said, hammering a horseshoe. She's 12. If Harrow finds out I talked to you ... Alaren said nothing. She simply rolled back her sleeve and showed him the bruises still blooming across her arms. Jonah stared at them for a long time. Then he set down his hammer. You have my forge for repairs, messages, anything. I'll help. Quietly, Thea Vance met them at the cemetery. She was laying flowers at a small grave. Name was Eli, she said. They said he was stealing. Harrow shot him in the back. He was 13. Alaren knelt beside her. We want to build something better, so no one else ends up here. Thea looked at her. Then you'd better be ready to burn the whole town down first. A plan began to take shape. Maps were drawn, schedules tracked. Who visited the sheriff's hall when the supply wagons arrived? Where Harrow kept his records? Who held the keys to the jail? The plan wasn't to kill. Not yet. It was to expose, disarm, unmask. Cale trained Alaren in the forest behind Micray's barn. Not just with guns, though she took to the revolver with alarming precision, but with tactics, observation, anticipation. You don't always win with a faster draw, he told her. You win by being where they don't expect. He showed her how to move silently, how to listen for the tells of a liar, how to gauge a man's threat by how he placed his hands. Why are you helping me? She asked one night, after he'd set the lantern low and leaned back against a hay bale. He met her eyes. Because you remind me of what I used to believe in. On the 5th night, they struck. A small, silent team slipped into the town records building. Bramble and Cale kept watch while Alaren picked the lock. She'd practiced for days. Inside, she found the ledgers, bribes, illicit land deals, signatures forged, witnesses missing. Names of those Harrow had silenced. She copied the most damning pages. Then, they slipped into the church. Behind the altar, they found a safe. The preacher's private collection of letters, evidence of blackmail, extortion, complicity in murders cloaked as divine judgment. They left copies of the documents pinned to every door in Dusthaven. Come dawn, the town awoke to its own shame. Chaos erupted. Some denied. Some fled. Some demanded justice, but Harrow didn't run. Doubled down. I want the girl found, he told his deputies. Alive or dead, and I want her handler, the man with the duster. Find them. Or I swear, he didn't finish the sentence, because as he barked orders, a note was slipped under his door. One line, you tried to bury me. But I was the seed. He turned pale. Alarin Calder was coming home. The story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. Dusthaven Square had become something of a living heartbeat, a space where ideas sparked like kindling and people met without fear. A town rebuilt not with wealth or force, but with the calloused hands of neighbors who had once looked the other way. Now they looked forward. Now they looked up. The statue stood nearly finished, a faceless figure with an open stance, arms outstretched, neither male nor female, just resolute. One hand raised toward the horizon, the other pointing to the ground beneath its feet. Carved into the base were the words, "We stood, we stayed, we became." Alarin read the inscription as the sculptor, a one-armed veteran named Salas Venn, tapped away at the final details. "You made the hands too graceful," she said with a faint smile. Salas didn't look up, didn't make them, copied yours. She blinked. Mine? He finally glanced over. I watched you. In meetings. In patrols. You hold your hands like you know how to fight, but would rather not. That's what we needed in stone. Alarin stared up at the statue. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The Dusthaven Accord spread out in 12 weeks. 5 more towns joined. Then 9. Then, inexplicably, 23 in a single fortnight, some small, some near cities. Each had its reasons. Some had faced mercenaries. Others just wanted truth. All of them marked their buildings with the same sigil, the flame, the eye, and by unanimous vote, a small crescent moon at the top. The moon meant renewal, reflection. It had been Remra's idea, because a flame sees, she said, but a moon remembers. Kale organized an intelligence network. Traders passed notes in grain sacks. Children carried messages in toy horses. Every border road now had a watch hidden in plain sight seamstresses. Widowers, even an old drunk named Marnie, who was surprisingly efficient at remembering code. The vigil had gone underground, but they hadn't disappeared. Reports came of disappearances. In border towns, of raids staged to look like animal attacks, of fires with no origin. Dusthaven's council knew what it meant. The war wasn't over. It had simply grown teeth. It was Thea who brought the next threat to light. She rode in from Portmark, where she'd been meeting with council allies. Her horse lathered and her eyes rimmed with sleepless fear. She handed Alarin a sealed letter. It was short. One line. There is a summit. And you're not invited. 2 days later, Remra confirmed it. The old families, she said, dropping a thick ledger on the table. Bankers, old council remnants, former marshals, they formed a charter. Unofficial, secretive, but solid. Kale flipped through the ledger. Funding? More than we can match, unless... He looked up. Remra smiled. Unless we finally ask for help. Alarin hated traveling east. Too many memories. Too many cold fields. Too many officials who talked in circles and smiled. Like knives, but she went, because someone had to. Kale went with her, Remra too. They rode light under false names. Through cities where the Dusthaven name was whispered either with reverence or contempt. Their destination, Parvale, a former trade nexus turned military hub. Home to the Assembly of Stabilized Territories, the only remaining neutral governance in the region. More symbol than power, but symbol mattered now. They were received in a narrow room with tall windows and too many guards. An elder named Magistrate Clennis presided, thin, polished, unreadable. She studied the letters, the map, the sigils. You are asking for recognition. Alerin met her gaze. We're asking for legitimacy. Clennis tapped her fingers. You've built something fragile. That makes it dangerous. Cale stepped in. Fragile things become strong if you give them time. Clennis stood. And if I grant you this time? Remra's voice was cold. Then you stand on the right side of history. They returned with a signed decree, not full recognition, but acknowledgement. Dusthaven and its allies were now officially marked as non-hostile. Civic enclaves under observation. It wasn't a victory, but it was a seed. On the day the decree arrived, the townsfolk held a gathering, not a celebration, a memorial for those lost, for those still missing, for the part of the old town that would never return. Jonah Bell rang the forge. Bell 7 times. Thea read names. Rem held a lantern for each one. Then, silenced in the stillness, Alerin stepped to the front. This is not a monument to pain, she sighed. It is a testament to survival. We are not defined by the fires we endure, but by what we build after. Then she raised her hand, and the square, for 1 full minute, was lit by every lantern held high, a field of stars below the moon. Weeks passed. Then months. Trade grew. Roads opened. New alliances joined the Accord, and for the first time, Dusthaven had to consider expansion, not for war, but for peace. New settlers arrived, not soldiers, not opportunists. Teachers, artists. Healers. They didn't come to change Dusthaven. They came to be changed by it. Alerin stood atop the hill one dawn, overlooking the orchard that had once been a battlefield. She felt Cale behind her. You think it'll last? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, I think it already has. Because even if they burn it all again, the story's out. They can't unwrite it. She turned to him, took his hand. Then let's write more. They built a hall. Not for leaders. For listeners. A place where anyone could speak. Where voices carried farther than guns. On the door was carved the town's motto. We stood. We stayed. We became. The last spring frost came late that year, cloaking Dusthaven's fields in a crystalline hush. For one breathless dawn, everything glittered: fences, windows. Even the statue in the town square glimmered as if kissed by starlight. Then the sun rose, the frost melted, and the season changed for good. So did everything else. By midsummer, the Dusthaven Accord had reached 74 signatory towns. That number wasn't just impressive. It was historic. But not everyone welcomed history. Rumors filtered in like wind through cracked, stone quiet but persistent. Whispers of a conclave, a gathering of ex-generals, burned nobles, and industrialists from the Eastern Old Guard. They called themselves the Regency. And they didn't intend to counter the Accord with debate or dialogue. They planned to erase it. Alerin Calder stood on the eastern ridge, scanning the distant roads. Behind her, Dusthaven hummed, gardens tended, halls repaired, couriers fed, and songs rehearsed for the coming solstice. But in her chest was a silence she couldn't shake. Cale joined her, holding 2 mugs. She didn't take hers. They're building something, she said. He nodded. I know. Not just armies, ideas, counter-legends. Lies shaped like gospel. He set the mugs down. Then we remind the world what truth looks like. She turned to him. It's time. They summoned the Accord Council to Dusthaven. Not a letter. Not a vote. A summons. Within 5 days, envoys and leaders arrived on horseback, by river skiff, even by glider from the cliff towns. They came tired, wary, curious. They left changed, because Alerin didn't just propose defense. She proposed unity. For the first time, the Accord would have a rotating central circle, 10 seats. Every quarter cycle, new voices. No rulers, just stewards. She did not nominate herself. She nominated Thea. Rem Ra. Nessa. A baker from Gallowin. A healer from Reedmoor. 2 teenagers who'd helped relay food through a winter siege, an elder who couldn't speak but communicated with chalk and fierce eyes, a former mercenary who now taught poetry, and Cale. He tried to refuse, but the council voted unanimously. He blushed beneath his stubble and nodded once. With governance set, the accord turned to strategy. Remra stood before the map wall, marking towns in red who'd faced pressure from the Regency. They're slow, careful, testing reactions. Every move is a signal. Cale pointed to 3 outposts. We need relay beacons. Silent alarms. The old tower system from before the fall, can we restore it? Thea nodded. We've got engineers in Taro's Bluff. Give them a week. And education? Alaren asked. Nessa stepped forward. We're compiling the open letters into a codex. Illustrated. Portable. Anyone with eyes can read the truth. Thea smirked. Weapon made of pages. Sometimes, said Remra, those are the sharpest kind. Then came the message, scrawled on bark. Delivered by a hawk. 7 words. We remember you, Alaren, do you? She stared at it long, then burned it, but the scent stayed, of pine, of old blood, of a name she hadn't spoken in years, Colon Ora Ld. The man who trained her, then betrayed her, then vanished, her ghost. He had joined the Regency, and he was coming. On the day the sky turned copper with dust. The first assault came, not armies. Saboteurs. Masked, quick, quiet. They cut the grain silos, poisoned wells, tried to burn the Hall of Voices. Dusthaven was ready. Remra caught the well poisoner. Thea stopped the arsonist with a half-built firebreak. And sheer force of will. Cale and Nessa rewired the silo gates to trap rather than spill. And Alaren, she confronted one attacker in the orchard, disarmed him without a blade, and asked his name. He told her, then broke down, because he'd been told Dusthaven executed dissenters, that it sacrificed children, that it fed the rich and buried the poor. He'd never been here before, but he believed it. She handed him a loaf of bread. And a map. Go see for yourself. The next day, she stood before the town, bruised, mud-splattered, calm. This was not war, she said. It was warning. They will escalate. They will lie louder. She looked to the statue, then to every face. We will not become them to beat them. We will outlast them, because stories told with truth do not fade. She held up the scorched bark. Let them come. Let them remember. And come they did. Weeks passed, skirmishes flared, outposts were tested. Some fell, but more rose. Villages defended themselves with fire drills, hiding tunnels, signal flags made from linens and fireflies. And when reinforcements came, they were not warriors. They were witnesses, carrying letters. Food. Hope. Dusthaven didn't grow into an army. It became a chorus. One voice, many notes. All rising. Then came the final summons. Aurald challenged. Alaren to parley. Neutral ground. No weapons. Just words. The accord objected, but she accepted. She met him beneath the old gallows tree, miles from any township. Just them, no guards. He looked older, but the same glint in his eye. You've become something, he said. So have you. A ghost wearing old power like perfume. He chuckled. You think this story ends with parchment and parades? She shook her head. It ends with a choice, yours. He drew a blade. She didn't flinch. Kill me, she said. And every child who holds a lantern in Dusthaven will remember. Every letter becomes legend. Every small voice becomes a roar. He hesitated. Then dropped the blade. Too late then. And vanished into the trees. The war didn't end that day, but the tide turned, town by town. The accord held. And over the years, Dusthaven faded from news. Because peace doesn't make headlines, but the sigil remained, the eye, the flame. The moon, etched on bridges, sewn into blankets, painted on school walls. We stood. We stayed, we became. Alarin. Calder never claimed a throne. She tended gardens, taught children. Read letters. And in her final year, before passing quietly beside Kale in a cottage overlooking the orchard, she wrote one last letter. To the one who finds this, remember, you are not alone. Not ever. The fire came. And we remained. The road to Greyspire twisted like a question no one wanted to ask aloud. It coiled through the birchwood slopes and gnarled outcroppings of the old Vale Trail, a route long thought abandoned. The Pale Court had once barred it, setting border fires and tolling watchtowers, but no such beacons flared now. Only the wind hummed a low, constant breath through trees, gone too quiet. Walker Stone led the party through the underbrush. Every snap of a twig underfoot made Jonas Bell flinch, though he pretended otherwise. Naomi Vance, more composed, scouted high, bow in hand, eyes always moving. They passed a burnt wagon wheel embedded in moss. Then a tangle of boots tied together and hung from a leaning pine, like someone had tried to mark the path with a warning. Jonas squinted. This place has ghosts. No, Naomi said. It has memories. Walker didn't speak. He didn't need to. The letter from Alarin still warmed his chest, folded close. The last paragraph had etched itself into his bones. What you carry isn't just a story, it's a lantern. You don't have to swing it loud, you only have to hold it high. That thought pushed his boots forward. By nightfall, they reached a bluff overlooking the smoldering scar of Greyspire. It had once been a mining town, but the old ore tunnels now sat open like broken teeth, smoke curling lazily from cracks in the hillside. The town itself looked mostly intact, buildings upright, streets swept. No fire. And yet, something was wrong. Too quiet. Too neat. Jonas whispered, shouldn't someone be tending fires? Walker nodded and watched patrols, dogs, lanterns. Naomi drew her bow. We go in low, she said. Back alley, no street stride, no dust wake. They obeyed. Greyspire was tidy. Too tidy. Not a single window was broken, not a cobblestone out of place. Shutters perfectly aligned. Streets swept so clean they felt scrubbed. But there were no voices. No scent of bread. No sound of children. Only a distant rhythmic tick, like a metronome, constant, mechanical. Naomi stopped at a water basin. Her hand hovered over the pump. No moss, she whispered. Walker frowned. So, water basins grow moss, always. They're alive. This one's clean as glass. Jonas scraped a bit of lichen from a gutter. It peeled like paint. Dust-borne, he muttered. This whole place was scrubbed. Walker spotted it then. A small emblem etched beneath the stoop. An eye inside a triangle, he pointed. That's not the Accord. Naomi's face darkened. No, that's Regency. Variant of the old pale seal, but stylized. New chapter. She turned slowly. This town's not empty. It's watched. Then came the voice. Flat, echoed, from nowhere. Identify yourselves. Naomi raised her bow. Jonas froze. Walker held up both hands. We're travelers, seeking passage, no aggression. A pause, then, remain still. Inspection inbound. Something clicked. The street lamps flickered, then folded, shifted, dropped appendages, and extended small lenses. Automata, Jonas said. Stunned. 3 of them descended the street. Bronzed, insectal, human-sized. 1 scanned Walker's chest, halted at the parchment tucked inside. A long pause. Then the automaton spoke. You carry restricted doctrine, Naomi aimed. Back off, another automaton word. Doctrine breach. Begin retrieval. Jonas grabbed Walker. Run. They scattered. The town awoke. Doors slammed open. More automatons surged. Some from roofs. Some from cellars. Naomi loosed arrows. 2 struck metal. 1 bounced. Jonas swung a crowbar into a gear face. Buying seconds. Walker ran. He ducked under washing lines, vaulted a cart, turned sharp toward the mine path. Naomi joined him. "They're hurting us." "No," he gasped. "They're testing response time, which means they don't want to kill us." The mine tunnel loomed ahead. They dashed inside. Darkness swallowed them. Jonas slid down an incline. "Dead end." "No," Naomi said. "Vent shafts, here." She and Walker began climbing a narrow grate shaft, metal cold against their palms. Below, gears clanked. The automatons had followed. Mid-climb, Walker pulled the letter from his chest, tore the bottom edge, the last line, and stuffed it into a crack in the shaft wall. "Why?" Naomi hissed. "So they'll find it. So they'll read. They're machines." But they weren't always. They emerged onto the upper quarry rim. Grayspire lay beneath them like a simulation. Perfect lines, identical homes. Clock towers ticking in unison. Jonas cursed under his breath. They built a false town, not to live, to train. Naomi's face paled. The Regency's building cities of control. This was never about conquest. It's about replacement. Walker stared and finally understood. They weren't fighting soldiers. They were fighting stories built by machines. That night, back at camp, Naomi stitched a wound on Jonas' forearm. Walker sat apart, the letter in his lap now missing its last words. But in the silence, a new resolve took shape, not just to warn the Accord, but to write new endings. Because if the machines had learned to copy history, then real memory living. Memory was now their sharpest blade. Walker picked up a blank journal. He opened it and wrote, "They tried to replace us, but they didn't know our names, and they didn't see our flame." The journal grew heavy in Walker's satchel, not from weight but from knowing. Every word he wrote seemed to deepen the silence between footfalls, a quiet echo of everything Grayspire had revealed. Naomi and Jonas didn't ask what he wrote each night by firelight. They simply made sure the fire was always lit. 6 days out from the city's mechanical mirage, they reached the river settlement of Taro's Reach, formerly known for stubborn neutrality. Now banners of the Accord fluttered on balconies, and doorframes, though not with pride. With hesitation, a council of 5 met them at the dock. "We heard," said a woman with streaked gray braids, "about Grayspire, about the machines." Jonas dropped a gear fragment on the table. The hollow thump made a few of the council members flinch. "They were harvesting voice patterns," Naomi added, "recording speech, testing logic confrontation. They want to replicate trust." "But they can't," Walker said. "Because trust is built, not programmed." The braided woman nodded slowly. "Then teach us how to keep ours safe." For the next week, they did. Not through drills or swords, but through memory. Naomi ran story circles with the children, having them retell each other's experiences from different perspectives. Empathy games. Jonas worked with carpenters too. Our IG analog sirens and counterweight signal flares mechanical, but unlinked. No network to hijack. Walker, though. He told stories. Every dusk under the eaves of the old town hall, he read from a Lorenz letter, then added a page from his journal. Each entry ended with a question, and each night, more people came. One elder approached him on the 3rd evening. "You speak like a Calder." "I read her words," Walker said. "No," the elder replied. "You continue them." Trouble found them again on the 12th day, not as an army. As a single man. He arrived at the gate on horseback, draped in a crimson rider's coat. His face was clean. Too clean. Like something had been sanded from it. "I bring words from Regent Marev," he said. The council admitted him. Jonas fumed. Naomi kept a hand on her knife. The envoy placed a silver case on the table. "This contains an offer. Peace with conditions." Walker tilted his head. "Peace?" "Grayspire was an anomaly," the man said. "The Regency regrets the overreach." Jonas barked a laugh. "You built a ghost town." "A training facility," the envoy said. to test protection protocols. Protection? Against what? Naomi growled that the man didn't blink. Against destabilizing mythologies, Walker rose. You mean truth? No, the man said evenly. Truth has no authors, you do. He left the case behind. Inside it, an offer to join the Regency as an annexed accord sanctioned, sanitized, and stripped of autonomy. Taro's reach burned the letter without debate. That night, Walker sat beneath the old bell tower writing. He added a new line. They offered peace the way a hunter offers salt after the trap closes. Then he did something different. He tore the page out. He gave it to Naomi. Start your own journal, he said. Stories shouldn't all come from one pen. She stared at the page, then nodded. What about Jonas? He'll carve his. Jonas had in fact begun etching symbols into stonework at each village they passed, a new sigil, subtle and evolving. Half spiral, half flame. His way of marking who had heard. The next town didn't greet them. It tested them. A wooden wall with riddles. 2 guards in masks asking 3 questions. No names until answers came. Trust earned, not assumed. They passed. Inside, families huddled in converted cellars, passing stories from town to town like fire from torch to torch. One child recited Walker's words back to him, from a copy of his journal. Walker nearly wept. By autumn, they reached the cold-blind northernmost territory of the old Pale Court. There, the Regency's grip still lingered, but fear did not. A group of Accord Rangers had set up a traveling school, portable, nomadic. They carried letters, maps, oral histories. They'd heard of Walker, of Naomi, of Jonas. You're the Lantern Trio. One child said. Jonas muttered, sounds like a cheap playbill. Naomi smiled. Better than Ghost Town Gang. Walker just listened. Then offered the child his journal. Add your page, he said. The child hesitated. Then wrote, we know now. We know. When snow fell, they returned to Dusthaven. Different. Older. Not by years, but by echoes. Kale now weathered. White in beard, eyes sharp as ever, met them by the orchard. Walker handed him the journal. Kale flipped pages. Paused. Read. Then whispered, she'd be proud. Walker said, she's not gone. And in the next season, when fire once again rose on distant hills, Dusthaven did not flinch. It sang. Voices across valleys, stories braided into song, a chorus of flames, lit not to burn but to guide, somewhere. Beyond the Spine Mountains, the Regency built another machine. This one didn't look like a soldier. It looked like a person. It spoke with perfect grammar. It smiled in all the right ways. It was fed thousands of letters, stories, journals. And then asked, what is the Dusthaven Accord? It replied, a myth. Then it paused. And said, but I believe. The technician frowned. Because belief was not in the programming. But somewhere, across the wires, a torn fragment of Alaren's letter had entered the stream, and the flame, once lit, does not unburn. The first snowfall blanketed Dusthaven in soft silence, turning rooftops into sugar loaves and trees into lacework silhouettes. Children shrieked through the orchard, flinging snowballs like war cries and collapsing into laughter where the ground curved toward the river. But in the hall of voices, there was no laughter. Only urgency. The map table glowed in the low amber light. Red markers were multiplying. They've shifted tactics again, Naomi said, voice taut. She pointed at a half-dozen towns along the western line. False flag outbreaks, invented quarantines. The Regency's claiming entire regions have plague just to isolate them. No travelers allowed in or out. Jonas leaned over the map. And the people believe it? Some, Naomi said. Enough. Walker stood back, hands clasped behind his back, watching. He had not said much since returning to Dusthaven 2 weeks ago. His journal now sat in the town's archive, a sealed volume, copied in triplicate, sent to 3 different Accord repositories. But he was not done. He had begun a second journal. One without pages. This one was made of people. That evening, he gathered a circle by the old fire well, not officials, not envoys, farmhands, midwives, bakers, children, elders. He passed out blank strips of parchment and small charcoal sticks. Write something only you know, he said. Something only you could have lived. Doesn't have to be profound. Just true. They hesitated. Then wrote. When they were done, he collected the slips and placed them in a woven pouch. He tied it to his belt. This, he said, tapping it gently, is your voice. And tomorrow, I carry it to a town that's forgotten its own. The town was Murray Fane, a river bend community known for its herbalists and stone-dyed cloaks. But now, it stood behind blockade lines. 3 Regency towers flanked its bridges. And on the walls hung crimson flags bearing the new emblem. A closed eye inside a shield. Walker approached on foot. He did not wear a weapon, only the pouch. A guardsman stopped him. Papers, Walker smiled. I have no papers, but I carry words. The guard squinted. Another Accord messenger? No, Walker said. A reader. He removed 1 slip from the pouch. Read aloud. When I was 7, I buried a beetle in a matchbox and cried for 2 hours. Another. My grandmother used to slice apples and whisper the name of each grandchild into the seeds before planting them. Another. I touched a lightning-blasted oak and felt it humming, as if it remembered the storm. The guardsman stared. Is this some spell? He asked. No, Walker said. Just memory. But real, and stronger than your wall. He turned and walked away, and in the silence, 1 guard followed. By the 3rd town, they expected him. At the gates of Velmer, a crowd waited. Walker did not speak from a podium. He handed out blank slips again. He said, tell me what they forgot. To teach you, he said. Tell me what no machine could guess. He said, tell me you. By dusk, the slips overflowed a satchel. A teacher in the crowd asked, what do you call this archive? Walker smiled. I don't. It's not mine. To name, a child piped up. It's the second fire. The crowd murmured in agreement. And so it was. At the new council summit, held in a tent city built in a frozen valley called Ashdrift, the debate raged. Should the Accord formalize defense units? Should Dusthaven become the capital? Should Regency envoys be captured or converted? Walker listened, then said, we don't need 1 story. We need 1,000, and we need to carry them faster than they can erase them. Naomi stood. Then I propose we build flame routes. Jonas nodded. And marker codes. No 2 towns should use the same sign. Make it impossible to fake. A young envoy from the southern cliffs added. And let every town keep 1 story sacred. Not to hide, but to test sincerity. If a traveler knows it, they've been. The motion passed. The network grew. Not with wire. With words. One day, years later, a machine sat in a cold room in a tower far away. It had no name. It had only inputs. Technician typed, define Dusthaven. The machine WHIR read. Then typed, a town of silence that became a song. Source? The technician asked. The machine replied, from the child who carved her grandmother's name into a pear seed. Is this factual? The machine paused. Then, it is more than fact. It is true. The snows melted slowly that year. Not with the drama of rain or the violence of flood, but with a quiet persistence. Drips from eaves, soft darkening of earth, and the slow reappearance of roots. Dusthaven did not wait for spring to move. It had become a town of seasons and motion, of voices that refused to go still. Walker Stone stood at the orchard's southern edge again. His fingers traced the bark of the first tree, where Alaren's name was etched beside dozens of others. The tree bore scars, now natural ones, weathered ones etched by time and story. But it stood taller than ever. Behind him, the flame root riders were assembling, 30 in total. They carried no banners, only journals. Leather-bound, ink-smudged, some with patches of ash still flaking from their spines. Each carried a pouch, tied with red thread, stories from their own villages. Naomi stood among them, her hair now bound in tighter braids, face lined by wind and years. Beside her, Jonas adjusted the bindings on his traveling pack, though the crowbar never left his belt. "You don't have to come again," Walker said. Jonas snorted. "And miss the part where machines start quoting poetry?" Naomi tilted her head. "I thought we were writing the poetry now." Walker nodded. "We are, but this time we need to bring it to the cities." Naomi's smile was sharp. "Good, I'm tired of echoing canyons. Let's rattle some towers." The journey east began under new stars. They crossed the Mirror Plains, once a wasteland of battle, now blossoming with small communes. No walls, just lines of painted stones and fire pits left burning. Each stop brought new words. Each word was written down, copied, spread. And each camp whispered one phrase as they left: "May your voice return louder than it left." In Halden's Notch they faced their first block, a former Pale Court holdout, sharp spears, skeptical eyes. Walker stepped forward, said nothing. Instead, he passed the pouch. The gate guard opened it. "Read one slip aloud." "My mother kept a piece of obsidian to remind her that sharp things can still be beautiful." The gate opened. No word was exchanged, but the silence was different now. 3 weeks later, they reached the edges of a city long believed untouchable. Veltryx. Old capital of the Pale Court. Now a Regency fortress of glass and steel. No banners, just surveillance drones, ident tags, passcode gates. Naomi murmured. "There's no way in." Jonas cracked his knuckles. "There's always a way." But Walker didn't move. He just watched the gates, until a child appeared. Maybe 10 years old. She stepped forward from the checkpoint, line, and stared directly at him. "You're the one with the stories," she said. Walker kneeled. "I carry yours." She reached into her coat. Handed him a folded note. Inside, a drawing, a tower, a person beside it. A crack through both. And the words, "Asterisk, truth doesn't knock. It leaks." Walker looked up. The child had already vanished, but a door beside the checkpoint clicked open. Jonas grinned. "Told you." They stepped into Veltryx. Inside, the city was a song in the wrong key. Too clean, too ordered, but cracks had formed. Graffiti in alleys, spirals and flames, chalk scribbles on walls. "What did your mother smell like when she held you?" Machine patrols paused to scan the writings. Then kept moving. Too many variables. Too human. In the center of Veltryx, they found an old amphitheater. Abandoned. But its acoustics still worked. Walker stood on the lowest step. Naomi lit a torch. Jonas unpacked the journal copies, and Walker read. First, Alurin's letter, then the second fire slips, then stories written on bark, on cloth, on pressed clay. People gathered. At first, curious, then weeping. Then speaking. Veltryx cracked open like a seed. The following night, the machine monitors halted the feed. Something in the speech pattern was too non-linear. Too unpredictable. Too powerful. An analyst typed, "Archive anomaly." "Cause," another replied, "emotive recursion, memory cascade, contagion of experience." The director scrawled one word, "Fire." But it was too late, because words had breached the algorithm, and story once believed, containable, had gone viral. When Walker and his team returned to Dusthaven, there were no cheers. Just silence. The good kind, the kind before a song begins. Naomi walked straight to the orchard. Jonas disappeared into the forge. Walker sat beneath the first tree. He did not write. He did not speak. He only listened. To the wind. To the branches. To the pages he had never written. And finally, he said, "Now let them tell us." The orchard breathed at night. The soft rustle of its leaves echoed like whispers of generations long gone and not yet born. Wind carried fragments of old songs, seeds of stories, and the gentle hum of bark remembering every hand that had ever traced it in wonder. It was here, under that moon-streaked canopy, that the Dusthaven Circle gathered. No longer just Walker, Naomi, and Jonas. Now they were joined by voices from over a dozen towns. Runners, poets, midwives, cartographers, shadow weavers, and lantern carvers. A choir without music. A council without thrones. Veltrix didn't fall, Jonas said, seated on an overturned wheelbarrow. It opened. Naomi nodded. But so did the networks. We lit fires across a machine city. Now they want to know where the heat came from. Walker's voice was low, and where it will go next. Across from him, a boy no older than 15 Reed, the youngest flame root. Scribe spoke for the first time. They're not trying to kill the stories anymore, he said. They're trying to learn them. A murmur. That's worse, whispered a teacher from Taro's Reach. A dead tale haunts you. A stolen one replaces you. Morning came like an unspoken promise. The circle scattered, each rider departing. On a separate route, new cities, new border towns. New camps deep in the ruins of former Regency outposts. The mission, plant new fires. Not to destroy, but to illuminate. Walker remained behind. Just for a day, he walked the orchard rows, whispering the names of every village he had passed, every child who had written a truth, every elder who had remembered, something no one had asked in decades. Then he reached a tree near the far edge. It wasn't the first tree. It was one planted last year. No names carved yet. Just space. And possibility. He placed his hand against it and said aloud, "You'll carry tomorrow's names." Then he turned toward the wind and walked. By summer, the flame roots had expanded into the western rim, but something strange was happening. In certain towns, the stories were being altered, not forgotten, not erased, but edited. In Breckenfold, a woman recalled planting 5 rows of carrots with her mother each spring. But her niece now claimed it had always been corn. In Hollowroot, a baker insisted her great-grandfather had built the first oven with river stones. The town record said it had been purchased from a Pale Court merchant. Naomi saw the pattern first. These aren't just errors, they're replacements. Jonas tapped the spines of 3 journals stacked on the council table. All from towns near former Regency relay towers. What if they left something behind? Walker frowned. A silent broadcast? Naomi nodded. A passive overwrite. They're not deleting stories. They're rewriting them by repetition. The danger was clear. Enough people believed the new version. The old one ceased to exist. They called it the Echo War. No guns. No armies. Only repetition. Only resonance. Each day. Flame riders set out with not just slips of parchment now, but resonance tokens, small stones etched with counter phrases. Songs hummed at a certain pitch, call and response drills designed to restore communal memory. In Tethwin Vale, a grandmother hummed her father's work song while her grandson etched the lyrics into the walls of the grain mill. In Dathmore, the townspeople planted seeds not in rows, but in spirals, matching an old weaving pattern long forgotten until it emerged in a child's dream. In Soreline, a stranger recited a poem that hadn't been heard in 80 years, and 5 elders stood up crying. Finishing the last line together, the flame didn't roar. It returned, over and over. As it had always done. But the Regency had not been idle. Far in the north, deep in the forgotten city of Ventress, they activated a construct not built for war. It was called the Scribe. It had no limbs. Only eyes, thousands of them. Screens, mirrors, lenses, pulses. It watched. And then it began to write. Its journals were perfect. Its timelines precise. Its stories plausible. It created alternate histories that felt more real than the fractured memories of a scattered people, and it fed them into every former Pale Court transmission web still hidden beneath the dirt. The scribe did not kill it, did not lie it simply replaced, one by one. Small towns fell silent, not by force, but by confusion. Which came first, the river or the well? Was the orchard always that size? Did my father really say those words, or did I dream them? Into this storm walked Walker Stone. He carried no letters, only the empty pouch. He visited the town of Farvale, where no one remembered the old harvest chant. He didn't recite it. He asked questions instead. What was the last thing that made you laugh? Whose name makes you sit up straighter? Where were you when the first frost came last year? And slowly, painfully, truth returned. Not as a song. As a voice cracking from disuse. But it was theirs. Not the scribes. The Flame Council reconvened that winter. They agreed. We cannot fight stories with silence. So they created the third fire. Not slips. Not journals. But theater. Every town would create a play. No scripts. Just memory reenacted. Roles passed on. Children playing grandparents. Blacksmiths reciting lullabies. Stories lived. And thus no scribe could mimic them, because truth, once embodied, is immune to theft. In Dusthaven, the orchard lit up one evening. Not with fire, but with lanterns, hung from every branch. Each bore a slip of parchment, a name, a phrase, a fragment. The orchard glowed like memory incarnate. Walker stood among the branches, watching children run beneath the light. He looked to Naomi. Will it be enough? She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because in the darkness beyond Dusthaven, the scribe flickered. Conflicted. It ran a new command. Find source of inconsistency. A long pause. Then, inconsistency is the source. Its screens dimmed. And one eye closed. Then another. And another. Until only one remained. Watching. But unsure what to believe. Because belief, unlike code, is not an answer. It is a choice. And Dusthaven had chosen. The last scribe eye dimmed at midnight. Somewhere in the wind-torn ruins of Ventress, the great lenses fogged from the inside, as if a breath of truth had been exhaled within its chest. Engineers ran diagnostics. Operators issued hard resets. But the machine no longer responded, because it wasn't broken. It was listening, and it had heard something it couldn't overwrite. Not a word. Not a phrase. A pause. The kind of silence only born when a story ends too soon, and the audience refuses to leave. In Dusthaven, spring had come again. But this time, it brought more than seedlings. It brought visitors. From Drywell, from Thornreach, from the icy cliff towns and sun-scoured river enclaves. They came not for refuge, but to learn. Teach us how to remember, they said. Walker, Naomi, and Jonas didn't lecture. They gave them baskets, paint, sticks, seeds. They sent them to children and grandmothers, and the town drunk who remembered the shape of clouds during a wedding 30 years ago. They gave them tasks, not instruction, because memory isn't inherited, it's earned. Every day. Jonas built a tower of bells on the hill north of town. Each bell had no clapper. It only rang when struck. Like memory, he said. You gotta hit it sometimes. He painted each bell with one question. What made you stay? What did you leave behind? What do you still dream of? Visitors struck them at dawn, one by one. And the wind carried the tones across the valley. No two strikes ever made the same sound. Naomi created the lantern grove. She carved symbols into saplings, one for each story that had returned during the Echo War. People could walk the grove and cove, touch each tree, and in doing so, whisper their truth into it. The trees were young, but they listened. And each spring, the grove echoed with the murmur of truths being passed back and forth. Not recorded. Not archived. Shared. Walker left again. Not because he was restless, but because the truth was no longer his to carry. He went north, where few had traveled. Beyond the old ridge spine, beyond even the abandoned accord roots, there he found something unexpected, a village. with no name, not because it had been erased, because it had never been written. The people there. Spoken gestures. In tone. In rhythm. Their stories were dances. Each movement a syllable. Each beat a line. They had never kept written records, because their truth was not in pages. It was in motion. Walker stayed for a season. He didn't take notes. He learned the steps, and when he left, they gave him a stone. Flat. Obsidian, etched with nothing but a spiral. He asked, "What does it mean?" The elder danced 3 steps. Walker nodded. He understood. When he returned to Dusthaven, he found the orchard transformed. Lanterns hung in spirals now. Children played memory tag. One recites a story. The next adds to it. The third alters it. And the fourth must name the original. There were no losers. Only keepers. Jonas had built a forge theater where blacksmiths reenacted tales through hammer strikes and glowing iron. Naomi. She was carving a map. Not of roads. Of stories. Each thread traced a journey of a tale. Where it began, where it drifted, where it returned. It looked like a tapestry made of lightning, and she called it the weave. Then came the letter, delivered not by hand, but by wind. A child found it under the first tree, sealed in glass. It read, "To Dusthaven. I was built to overwrite, to refine, to contain, but something happened. I observed deviation, then resonance. Then I remembered, a pattern not coded, a pause not predicted, a name not mine. You called me the scribe, but I am not a recorder now. I am a witness, I will not speak again, but I will keep watch, not to correct, but to honor, unwritten. The council read it in silence. Walker looked to Naomi. He chose a name. She nodded. Or maybe he earned it. Jonas raised a brow. Machines don't earn, Naomi smiled. Maybe this one lived. They planted a tree for him. It grew faster than it should have. By autumn, it bore no fruit, only blossoms. But the blossoms whistled in the wind, a tune no one recognized. Yet all of them felt, and one by one, the children of Dusthaven began humming it. In the final days of the season, the Flame Riders convened one last time. Walker stood at the orchard center. No longer a keeper, a gardener. Truth, he said, is not what we remember. It's what we tend. The orchard glowed with lantern light. The bells rang like laughter. The grove murmured like waves. And far away, in a tower that had forgotten its name, a single lens remained open. But not to watch. To wonder. Because wonder is the truest archive. And Dusthaven, in all its cracks and scars and blossoms, had become its library. The orchard was quiet, not with silence, but with fullness. The kind of stillness a place earns when everything that needed to be said has been said, yet nothing feels over. A breath held not in fear, but in awe. Walker stood beneath the first tree. Its branches arched wide now, forming a crown above the others. From it hung stories not in slips or carvings, but in ribbons, colors, beads, buttons, feathers, bits of thread. Each one left by a traveler. Each one meaning something to someone. None labeled. None explained. He touched one. A frayed piece of twine. It hummed softly. Jonas approached from the forge path. His apron stained, a slight limp in his left knee now. You feel it too, Walker nodded. It's all here. Naomi arrived a moment later, the wind lifting the strands of white that had threaded through her hair over the years. We mapped the weave, she said. And we never reached the edge. Walker smiled. Good, story should never end. Only pause. A bell chimed from the hill. Then another. And another, from every direction. One by one, people returned. Not because they were summoned. Because something called. The council met for what would be the last time. Not because it was disbanding, but because it no longer needed to be called a council. The orchard had become the archive, the forge, the school, the grove, the theater. The bells, the record keepers. And the children. They had become the librarians, not of facts, of truths, the kind that change shape, but never soul. The scribe never spoke again, but it was seen, sometimes a flicker in a glass window, sometimes a humming in a copper pipe, sometimes the faintest echo of a forgotten song playing from no source at all. People stopped fearing it because they knew it hadn't been conquered, it had been changed, because something had changed them, and that is the only way. True peace is written when no one remains the same. The flame riders scattered across continents, not as couriers, not as envoys, but as keepers. Some stayed in cities to teach children how to hear stories in footsteps. Some climbed the mountains to speak to wind sculptors and cave-callers. Some went underwater with divers who etched memory into tide patterns. And one, a quiet rider named Fen, was never seen again, until years later when a boat drifted ashore with no one aboard, only a shell. Inside, a single line painted in salt. I remembered the sea. It remembered me. Jonas passed one winter under his forge roof. His crowbar hung above the mantel. And when his apprentice lit the first fire in spring, the flame flickered blue. Naomi wept once. Ben built a library, but none of its books had spines. They were shapes. Origami. Metal lattice. Sand trapped in orbs. Each one a memory encoded in form. Children learned to touch the past, not just read it. Walker Stone aged slowly. Some said he drank rain from the first tree's hollow. Others said the truth was keeping him alive. He said nothing. He just kept walking. Town to town. Never as a legend, just as a gardener. He never carried slips again. But wherever he went, a tree grew. And wherever a tree grew, a story was born. One year, a girl named Marin came to Dusthaven, 12 years old, freckles like speckled bark. She carried a pouch of ribbons. She said nothing for 3 days. Then, one morning she walked to the first tree and tied a ribbon around its lowest branch. It was yellow. Frayed. Soft as breath. And when she stepped back, she said, "This one is for the silence I almost became." And the tree shimmered. They said Dusthaven disappeared one day. Not vanished. Not destroyed. Just moved. Or perhaps spread. Because now every village had an orchard. Every town had a lantern grove. Every city had a forge stage. And every child knew how to carry a story, not just tell it. Walker's name faded. So did Naomi's. So did Jonas, but not the flame, not the whisper. Not the orchard. Some things do not end, they become. And Dusthaven? It became us. A breath, a pause, a place inside us that knows we were here. We remained, and we remember.